And we are live. My name is Terry Thompson. I am the host of Unbreakable Stories, along with my co-host Bonnie. Bonnie, how you doing tonight?
I am great. Yeah, it's been a really good week. How about
Yeah,
you?
I love it, man. I love the pre-game chat, air quotes, the pre-game chat, so to speak. So we had some really good conversation, about trusting your intuition and everything. And that's the conversation here tonight is trusting the process. But really, we're going to focus in on intuition. And intuition is one of those things to where you kind of know you're right, or you kind of know you're wrong, or you're looking into the future. You see this crystal ball. It's like, there it is, man, this is going to suck. Oh man, this is going to be great. And then like you have all these emotions and everything running through your mind and running through your body and this, that, and the other. And then when you get there, it's like, oh, it's either a letdown or it's pure excitement or whatever the case may be. So we're going to dive into intuition, but I want to hear Bonnie's thoughts first. Bonnie, what are your thoughts about intuition? Like, what does that mean to you? And what is like one situation to where you could, that like a story you can share to where you either needed to trust your intuition or you didn't know or whatever. Uh, let's dive in.
Yeah, I think the biggest impact intuition for me has had is the long period of time. I tell people now that like I was medicating away my intuition. I spent, and this is no secret, but I spent a couple of decades on some pretty heavy duty psychiatric, like antidepressants and anxiety meds. And when you are taking medication like that that alters your state of mind and the way you feel, um, anytime you feel kind of like a little twinge, I was basically led to believe that all of that was anxiety, right? Anytime I felt something just didn't feel right in my body, it was chalked up to anxiety. And so that I was kind of programmed to believe that. And so when I came off of all those and was looking for more holistic remedies, if you will, it took me a while to start noticing the connection between these feelings in my body and then things that were kind of happening in the outside world, if you will, and learning how to hone that and not brush it off as anxiety or something else. So, yeah, I mean, it's a feeling. The intuition is really hard to describe because I think it might feel differently to different people.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, so for me, I think that intuition really kind of falls into the category of confirmation bias. It really does. So it's like you're going into this thing with this preconceived idea of, man, this is going to suck, this is going to be great, or like when I was in the military, I used to go out on missions all the time, and I was like, man, this is going to suck. I know this is going to suck. And then we get out there, and it's like it's either that confirmation bias is either confirmed or it's denied. The mission either sucked, the situation either sucked, or it was amazing. And we learned something new or discovered something new or had an exciting moment. So for me, it's about dispelling that confirmation bias. But maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. What are your thoughts on confirmation bias?
yeah, so I'm not, I've heard the phrase, I would have to look it up, but it sounds a lot to me like you get what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were just talking beforehand about I've had a few different doctor's visits in the past couple of days, and in the past I would have kind of expected the worst, like this is going to be uncomfortable, I'm not going to like this, and I didn't go into the appointments this week that way at all. I've done a lot of inner work over the past several years, and we were sharing with you that I noticed how different the medical staff and the office visits, even like I guess they're not called secretaries anymore, like the administrative assistants. It was just a completely different experience for me. I've never, well, not never, all but one dentist has been a horrible experience for me all through my life.
Mm-hmm.
We had one guy that we really liked for a few years, and then they moved. And I didn't let, though, my past experience with the dentist influence going in there today, and it made a huge, like incredibly huge night and day difference. And I walked out of there feeling really good about what's about to happen. I know it's not going to be the most pleasant experience what I'm about to go through, but I'm not terrified. I'm not anxious. And I'm also not heavily medicated, which makes a huge difference. I used to go in there heavily medicated and still come out an anxious, nervous wreck. So for me, the confirmation bias, like I said, I'll have to look into that, but it does definitely sounds like you get what you're looking for, you get what you expect. And I think if you go into a situation expecting the absolute worst and focusing on what that worst looks like, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a worst case experience from that.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah, so I think that whenever whenever you have confirmation bias, it's one of those things to where you kind of want to trust it a little bit, so to speak. But it's like it really can lead to two ways, because you're either going to confirm or you're going to deny whatever that thing is. But here's where that really gets tricky, is that, let's say, for example, that you have this gut feeling, you have this intuitive like thing, and confirmation bias sets in. You're looking for that thing. So I think that immediately you're already like setting up limitations. You're already looking for the thing. You're already like, there it is, or there it's not, so to speak. So I think that whenever I start, here's something really awesome. So here recently I started listening to this audio book. It Takes What It Takes. Mark Drager, one of our good friends, he recommended the book, and I was like, man, I need to dig into this right here a little bit. So It Takes What It Takes. The focus on that book is about neutral thinking. And I started diving into that a little bit, and I was like, wow, neutral thinking is such an interesting concept and topic, because it really kind of allows you to not really have an intuition, not really have to worry about confirmation bias. It's like you're there, but it really dives into knowledge, skills, and experience in order to be able to be on that neutral wavelength of not judging things, not preconceiving things, not confirming or denying things, not really having to worry about, am I right? Am I wrong? Intuition kind of a thing, trust your gut kind of a deal. What is your thoughts on neutral thinking?
Yeah, that I think that's something you have to would have to develop. And as you're talking, I was thinking, intuition really is like a peek into what's about to happen, if you will. Like that's probably the best description I can give anybody. It's an inner knowing about something. And so neutral thinking, um, our experiences are tied to emotions. Um, and we have the opportunity, the option to change how we feel about certain things, but that takes practice. And that's where I believe neutral thinking would have to come in. It would be a practice. At least the way I'm envisioning it. For me, so I'm going to give you an example. I mean, trusting your gut and this intuition thing are kind of, they're innate. They come, it's like I said, like an inner knowing, an inner teaching, if you will. And you can get better at listening to them, better at paying attention to them. It's like a little voice speaking to you. And I very distinctly remember the first time I realized, like, hardcore instantly, that my intuition, like I was feeling, and then the thing was happening, as I got a flash, and Jameson was maybe 6 or 7, and he had just made a smoothie, big old cup of smoothie, right? And I'm like, we need to put a lid on that. And I went and I saw this flash. It was just like almost like an upside down, like a fountain, if you will. And I'm like, it was like oh crap. And the smoothie went to the floor, and the impact from it hitting the floor shot the smoothie up to the ceiling. Okay. So it was literally like a smoothie fountain everywhere. And it was like, wow, I should have pushed a little harder to get that lid on there immediately. Like I should not let him leave the kitchen. And it was like, wow, I kind of saw that like split seconds before it happened. And then I've had other instances like that. that have popped up, and I've learned to just pay attention to them. And the more I pay attention, the more that they happen. Um, as far as this neutral thinking, I feel like they would be two separate skills.
Mm-hmm.
And almost, I would venture to say, I haven't read the book, so I don't know, but almost like a ignoring or a disbelief of your intuition.
Mm-hmm. I
I
like
don't
that.
know. I'd
No,
have to read it though.
I like that, but I want to touch on something that you hit right there with your water fountain story, and that's intuition versus deja vu. How closely related do you think those two are?
Well, I mean, if you want to get into like esoteric or spiritual whatnot, I would say they're very, it's the same. It's not the same thing, but it's tied together in the same way. It's an inner knowing.
Yeah.
And the way I would describe deja vu in this sense that you've been somewhere before, is either like a remembering that's not in your conscious, it's maybe in your subconscious, if you will. But you know, some people believe in past lives and reincarnation, and we have, like, I've been here before. Like my inner guide, my spirit, who was with whoever's body at some other point, actually did this thing, and now we're here, you know, in a physical form all over again. So I mean, it really depends on how much and how deep you believe in that, in these different aspects. Um, but it would all boil down to, you know, your inner being experience versus your physical being experience.
So let's unpack that a little bit right here as well too, because intuition is trusting your gut. Deja vu could be like that subconscious mind. Maybe you've been there before or something like that. But what about gut versus subconscious mind?
Yeah. So it was, from what I know, recently discovered that something about the nerve endings actually in your gut, in your stomach, are more sensitive or something to that effect as or than your brain. And so it's like your gut picks up on frequencies, wavelengths, energetic fields, blah blah blah, in a way similar to your actual brain, and which is why you get that feeling in your gut.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody out there, lots of people out there who explain that way better than
There's a
just did.
whole lot of neuroscience behind that. Yeah. And I don't get all sciencey with things. It's interesting because, you know, we're talking about intuition, and it's one of those things to where it's like you get this feeling in like the pit of your stomach, like, oh, I know this is what, you know, insert whatever situation there. And then you've got like this whole other situation to where it's like, man, I've been here before. Like this feels different. It's like, why didn't I see this before? You know, and then when it happens, you're like, wait a second, I've done this before. So it's kind of a weird feeling. It's like a weird mix between trusting your gut versus trusting your mindset, trusting your subconscious, because I know I like to dive into intentional thinking, and I love, you know, I love the whole intentional thinking thing, but it makes me wonder, is there something else there? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just we have multiple different types of knowing. Uh, and the subconscious stores things that the conscious isn't even aware of. And whether you look at it scientifically or spiritually or however, whatever suits you best, like there's no ignoring without outside substances or a lot of practice. When you get those gut feelings, a lot of people do brush them off as anxiety or nervousness or whatnot. And there can be overlap. And I'm gonna be the first one to tell you that the feeling for me, I was convinced was anxiety. And it took a while for me to separate them. You know, today I was a little bit nervous about this dental appointment that I had, but not nearly like what I used to feel, where I was a complete just like stomach completely in knots and whatnot. And so I think or I should say, I know it's also a very personal practice development and something that we're all born with, but it's whether or not we choose to develop, to listen. It's just like a lot of the other, you know, pieces of humans that aren't necessarily physical, if you will. Um, you know,
Yeah. So have you ever had like this gut feeling of something and you went into the situation with kind of a preconceived idea? It's like, man, you're aware, you're more awake, you're more, you're more intuitive, you're looking out for those things. Have you ever had like, what was like the number one thing that has ever been like dispelled? Like you went into something knowing something or feeling something and you was proven wrong. Like, have you ever had something like that?
mm, really only in the cases where I was having like excessive worry or anxiety.
Hmm.
Um,
Got it. And where does that come from though? Like where does that anxiety come from? Is that like a past experience or is it
oh
I
yeah, lots
I
of
don't know.
past trauma
Yeah.
stuff that I hadn't worked through at that point.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. I can see that. And I've had some experiences like that as well too. I had one today where I really went into the entire situation like, man, I'm going to crush this person, and it's like I want to destroy him, and it's like the conversation ended up being positive. I held back my emotions, I held back my feelings, I didn't preconceive anything. Even though my intuition kind of kicked in, I was like, I know that this is gonna, I know it, kind of a thing. And for the most part, it wasn't perfect, but even though it wasn't perfect, I still found the light in the silver lining, so to speak. And I focused on the positive versus focusing on the negative. And I think that when you have, when you have intuition kind of kicking in, and you're kind of having these little preconceived things, I think that you have to look for the silver lining within the situation. Otherwise, once again, it goes back to that confirmation bias. You're looking for it, you're anticipating it, but at the end of that, you also have the ability to take an intentional action towards the thing as well too, to where you can control the action. You might not necessarily be able to control the outcome, but you can control at least the action. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. I've had these discussions with my husband, and I'm not going to like throw him under the bus or anything here, but like there's been quite a few different instances, and he didn't believe any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would speak out, and it's like, man, he was always rushing, oh, we're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. And finally, after like the second or third time he was leaving the house, and I was like, this, it just felt off. Like I didn't have any specifics. I was just like, this, like, don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And when he left to go to Florida a couple of months ago, we got into this little argument, if you will. It wasn't even an argument. I don't know, it was disagreement before he left. And I had a feeling something was like off before that. It was almost like I didn't pick a fight. I don't know how to describe it. It was like if I could just get him to stay for an extra 30 seconds
Mm-hmm.
before getting in the car and leaving. And subsequently, later on, a couple of days later, he ended up getting rear-ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go into the details.
Yeah, sure.
But part of me was like, thank God I kept him an extra 30 seconds and we had that little argument, because it could have been a lot worse. And part of me was like, honestly, the first part of me was really mad at myself. Like, why didn't you make him stay home? Why didn't you do this? And then I had to flip it to, like you said, to this positive. It's like, thank God you had a conversation with him for 30 seconds more,
Yeah.
Even though it was
I love that.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
Because
we have some friends. We have a friend backstage. We have Alay backstage. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on here because I'm curious to see what his thoughts are about the topic. So welcome to the show, Alay. How you doing?
Very nice, thank you. How are you both doing tonight?
Doing every day is Monday, man.
I know, that's excellent. I like your topic tonight, actually. And it's an interesting topic for me because I tend to be like a logical mind, and I like to see things analytically. And therefore, When I am to make a decision or do something, I see it. Sometimes you can call it intuition, or for me, I just need more data. So the feeling is, oh, I need to know a bit more before I can make a decision. So that is usually what I see. And you, let's see, Terry, you mentioned about preconceived ideas. Sometimes I see it as sometimes a limitation, sometimes on your own experiences and your thoughts, so that sometimes it's better just to go and try it. And then you might learn something new. You might decide to change as you go along. But I think, as we mentioned often in the channel here and with Evan, taking action, doing one step, and then realign if you need to. So these are some thoughts.
I love that. Bonnie, do you have any questions for Alay?
Not questions specifically. I just want to comment that I do love. I understand the logical mind. I spent a long time in my logical mind and telling myself that the way I was feeling about certain things was illogical and that I needed to calm down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody's blessed with different gifts, right? And everybody's here to enhance or to hone in or to refine their own special gifts. And some people, for them, it's logical thinking and action taking. For other people, it's feeling their way through things, and I think the best that we can do is just be open-minded to different ways people receive different information. To put a spin on one of Terry's favorite phrases, everybody experiences things differently, or different people experience things differently. This is one of those cases. And for me, for a long time, like I said, I relied on logic versus how I felt, because I didn't think I could trust how I felt. So,
and I have a lot of respect for you and anybody that have an intuition and they can trust it. And that's something that I don't have that gift yet. Even though sometimes I may not feel that something is there. It's more about, I missed something. So let's see what I've missed, and then I can go forward. So I enjoy your perspective, Bonnie. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you. Just one thing I was just thinking of. I don't think it's that you don't have that gift at all, because I remember having you talking about feeling as though you needed to get out and take a walk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really the same thing. Like, some of it's cause and effect thinking, yes, for sure. But there's something inside you going, now's the time to go take a walk.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people don't stop and listen to that. And they keep doing whatever the activity is. It's making them agitated instead of stepping away. And so I believe that that's part of that.
It's interesting. You just reminded me of a word I haven't used in a long time, and it's serendipity. And I do believe in that, where either you decide, it's time to go for a walk, to look in a direction, and then somehow you just meet a person, you smile at someone, and they smile back, and your day just shifts completely. So I do believe in sometimes to be at the right place at the right time, and you need to be attuned to that. That's a great point. Sure. Thank you for reminding me that word.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so that brings me to another question about managing expectations. So whenever you have this kind of a gut feeling, you have this little intuition that something's going to go either positive or negative, how do you manage expectations? Or do you go in with neutral thinking like we was talking about, and maybe that manages the expectations? You don't really jump to any premature conclusions, outcomes, judgments, whatever the case may be. So I think that managing expectations, whenever you have this little thing in the pit of your stomach, what are your thoughts on that? Expectation management.
Oh, that's a good one. Over the years, I learned to minimize my expectations. So it stems from relationships and friendships and ups and downs, and having the most amazing days and the craziest hellish day in the world. And it's just appreciating the moment. So instead of having expectation of one way or the other, it's just not necessarily stepping back, but just feeling mindful that, just set aside I just lost my train of thoughts.
Unacceptable, Alay. Absolutely
unacceptable. I know it's unacceptable. Let's see. Manage the expectation. It's not to have any expectation. To say, just take it as it comes, and then make the best of it. So it's the whole idea of making lemonade with whatever comes in your life. So
I love that, man.
Yeah.
You just gave me kind of a flashback. I can't remember like where I read this, where I saw this from, but it was like maybe it was like Family Guy or something like that. It was like he had the coffee and he spit out the coffee and he goes, "It doesn't have any urine in it." So it was a crazy Family Guy episode anyway. I don't know why I thought of that, but like listening to that, it was like I thought of this Family Guy episode about that. But Bonnie, what are your thoughts? Expectation management when it comes to trusting your intuition.
Yeah. So expectations has been kind of this journey for me the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And what I've come to realize, I mean, you've got lots of different schools of thought, and people follow Gary Vaynerchuk. Of course, you've got David, and Evan. And what I've learned is it's not to not expect anything. I've learned to expect the best, but not have particular expectations about another human being doing something specific. And so my expectation is that everything works out for the highest good for everyone involved. But that doesn't mean that I'm expecting this person to behave this way or that person to behave that way or to get this thing from that person. It's kind of like I'm just going to have the most positive experience with this group of people as I possibly can. And that was a lot of work. Like there's definitely, especially with relationships, like if you have a spouse, like, there's things that I think when we get into a relationship with anybody, really, expectations that we have about how that should go and how we should be treated, et cetera, what we will and won't tolerate. And for me, it came down to learning how to separate an experience with someone from the whole of the person. And if a person was behaving in a specific way repetitively for a long period of time, then that's more of like a character trait versus, a behavior in one particular instance. And so that's where I kind of learned not to go in expecting someone to behave in a negative way, kind of like we were talking, like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. But also not having to have someone behave a certain way for me to feel good about the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't place the expectation of my happiness on any other person on the planet anymore. That's my job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took me a long time to really kind of accept that as well too, because being in the military, one of the most important values that we have is selfless service. So I didn't always think about myself. When I retired from the military 5 years, God, it's hard to believe I've been retired for 5 years now. So I've been out of the military for 5 years, but I still hold on to some of those thoughts and some of those processes and everything. But one of the biggest things that I just couldn't let go of was selfless service. And selfless service was one of those things where I didn't always put myself first. It took me a long time to really kind of do that, to have victory days, to take myself out and go do things and this, that, and the other. And it's one of those things to where, I have this, I don't know, I have this intuitive, how can I say this? Because I don't want to use the word intuition on this particular topic, because I go out thinking, oh man, today's going to be a great day. I'm going to love it. It's a victory day. But I'm going to be honest with you. I've had some victory days that just sucked. They truly have. They're like, man, that's just supposed to be like the best day ever. And it's like, I'm victory and celebrating this, that, and the other. And it's like, I didn't see it coming. It was like I didn't have any intuition of like, I just automatically expected. And once again, it goes back to that expectation management thing. I expected, oh, today's going to be a great day because it's a victory day. That's not always the truth. But how do you overcome those things whenever things just don't go the way that you expected or the way that you might have seen it or envisioned it? When things do not go perfect or do not go well, what would be your advice on how to maybe shift that to where it's like, ooh, things are not going the way that I expected or the way that I saw it or the way that I believed it to be true? How would you shift that? How would you change that?
Yeah, for me, that's about perspective management. That's really, I look at it now as being redirected. It was the same way with my husband's accident. Like, he was redirected. Like, what happened to him could have been fatal. It could have been really, really bad for a lot of people. And he was redirected somehow, somewhere, shape, or form along the travels, getting to that point. There was some kind of redirection that put him just slightly out of the right place at the right time, if you will. David Meltzer calls that being protected and promoted, where you're being protected from something worse and promoted. Sometimes things don't work out the way we want to, and then we find out later, if we're able to look at it with a positive lens, oh, okay, well, I got to do this instead. It took me a little while to see the connection, but that makes a lot of sense. Like, sometimes you get cut off on the highway and you're all riled up, and then you get further down the highway and you see a 5-car pileup that would have been part of you, like you would have been a part of, had you not had this guy, slow you down or whatever. And I think it's not a one-time deal. For me, it has been a practice over the past several years of constantly making these shifts in my perspective. Especially when you're dealing with other people, and especially, I can't stress this enough, when you've got children or other people you're supposed to be managing, because you've got multiple other personalities that you're trying to, let's say, direct, not necessarily control or influence. And I've really worked really hard this week, especially with my 6-year-old, because he's waking up every morning going, my whole body hurts. I can't go to school today. And it's like 9 minutes before we're supposed to walk out the door. He's like, I didn't eat breakfast and I did it. And I'm like, it's like,
my life hurts.
Yes. I'm like, I can't get up any earlier with you to make sure we get out the door on time. So it's like,
my hair hurts.
Yeah, but it's funny because I was talking to his teacher yesterday, and she goes, "You would never know because every morning he comes skipping in. Hi, Mrs. Waters." And I'm like, "Cool. Could you come to the house and pick him up on the porch?" But like for real, like honestly, like it's definitely been about making these perspective shifts, little by little. Like first, it's like, can I find the good in this? And then it's like, where can I find the good in this? And then it's practicing like each of those steps for a while. And sometimes you find you're knocked back even further, where it's like, I can't possibly find the light in this. Where is it? And you're reaching out, for help. But that's why I and many other people call it a practice, because it's something you just have to keep working at. And I guess you call it expectation management. It's probably essentially the same thing. Just one is like before and one is afterwards, if you will. Like one is it's proactive. I wouldn't say looking for the light and things would be reactive, but I guess it kind of could be, if you will. So yeah, it's just reframing a lot sometimes, over and over and over again, if you have to.
I love that.
And I do agree with you, Bonnie, because I think intuition can be something that you can develop in specific fields, for example. So I'm a teacher in high school. And if I go into an elementary school, let's say kindergarten or grade 1, there's a whole bunch of things I would not pick up on. But the teacher that has been there for a long time would be more attuned to individual in that time. If you go into business and you're in the boardroom, some people will be picking up on what is happening there, and I will have no clue. So I think in some ways, the more you can specialize yourself in some ways to be more attuned to your surrounding, but also what you feel as well. Because in some ways, expectation is very selfish. I have an expectation and you have an expectation, but then it just puts a lens to what is happening, or what you can notice around you. I like to say, instead of expecting something, I like to think of hypothesis. I notice something, so what if? And then it just goes, instead of looking inward for expectation, it just goes outward to see what is happening, what can I pick up, so that intuition can go on. It works with scientific experimentations, but also for someone who needs help. Sometimes you don't know and say, oh, what if, and then at some point you pick up on what the other person needs before that person actually knows what they need. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I love that. So I want to put like a couple of little twists on this as well too. So I want to take two different approaches with this. One, an athletic approach, and then two, a military approach.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, I was an athlete. And then of course I was in the military for 24 years as well too. So I want to tie intuition to training and conditioning. How your mind and body is conditioned, it will perform. How you are also trained, you will perform. So athletics versus military. So whenever you're running through your drills, you're running through the motions and this, that, and the other, you know that person's going to be there, whether you see them or not. You just have to trust the process, trust your intuition that I know when I twist this way and I throw the ball that way, so-and-so is going to be there. I know that's going to happen because we practiced it like 1,000 times in the gym or whatever the case may be. And, and even on the battlefield, it's the same thing. Oftentimes you don't know what person A is doing 20 miles away from you, but you just have to know deep down inside your gut that training is going to kick in. That person's going to say this, that person's going to do that, whether you physically see it or not. You just have to trust the process. You just have to trust your intuition that we are all trained the same way. I know how this person thinks, but here's where it gets really tricky. And this was the one thing that I learned in both sports and in the military. And that's variables. You don't really understand what the variables are. You don't know what the variables are. So you can trust the process. You can trust your intuition. You know how you've been trained. You know how you've been conditioned. But how do you deal with those silly, pesky little variables? Bonnie, Olay, what are your thoughts on variables?
You're going to hate my answer to this. This is the perfect example of how trusting the process and intuition are completely different parts of your brain, body, knowing, spirit, guide, whatever you want to call those. And I'm really glad, because I was having a hard time trying to separate the two and make it make sense, like verbally. Trusting the process, knowing there is a process, there is a system, there is a way things are supposed to happen, and you have practiced it, and this other person has practiced it over and over and over again, so that when you are backwards and you throw that ball over your head, your brain knows that guy's going to be there to catch it. Where your intuition kicks in is where that guy stumbles 10 yards beforehand when you haven't seen him, and your body doesn't throw the ball because your inner being, your inner knowing, your intuition has said, hey, that guy's not going to be there to catch that. Mm-hmm. Even though you've practiced it 497,000 times and he was there every other time. Does that make sense?
It does. 100%. Yeah. And I've done that. I've been there where it was like I went through the motions, and whatever it was, whether it was on a field, whether it was on an athletic field or a battlefield, I still went through the motions. And you have to trust that process. You have to know that, I know this is going to be there. And that's where that trust comes in. You not only have to trust yourself, but trust that, whatever you want to label it, the other person, the universe, whatever, that it's all going to be okay, that it's all going to be fine. Olay, what are your thoughts on that?
Your idea of variables is a very good thought, especially if I think of it as a scientist. I do agree that having a process and repeating it, what it does is it makes you think that others are there for you because you're part of a team. But I do agree with Bonnie that sometimes you have to keep in mind that everybody's doing what they can with what the resources they have at that time. So sometimes, even though you think that something must or should happen, it may not be there. And that's when like a much more delicate intuition will come through, I would think. And I was trying to see, even though we have the best system in the world, like you mentioned, the military or sometimes athletes or school, sometimes there's some things will happen, and you have to realize that these things happen, and you need to make the best out of it. And that's why intuition, sometimes you find it's rewarding when it works out, but sometimes you feel you feel let down a little bit because there's something you didn't think of or a variable. So it's
I love
crazy.
that. I love that. Yeah. So kind of a short show tonight. I just want to go ahead and go around the round table here and get some final thoughts. But before we do, Bonnie made this absolutely amazing printout here that I want to flash on the screen here, and it's the I Am Unbreakable printout right here. So Bonnie made this I Am Unbreakable printout, and if you go to unbreakablestories.com /share, you can print this out. You'll see all of our social media. And you can share it across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Tag us. We've got our social media right there. And you can use the hashtag #MyUnbreakableStory. We'll see that. And that'll let us know that you're supporting what it is that we're doing here at Unbreakable Stories. And we will reshare that across our social media. And you never know, you might end up on our website as well, too, with a link back to whatever social media that we saw that from. So if you want some free visibility on us, that's one great way to share your support. We'll support you right back with sharing that across our social media and our website as well, too. So here we go. Final thoughts right here. I want to go to Alay, Bonnie, and then I'll close out the show with final thoughts about intuition. Alay, over to you. What are your final thoughts here tonight?
Oh, what I'm going to say is just move forward and trust your gut. And if it works out, excellent. And if sometimes there's a little, you have to do a few detours, well, excellent anyway. Just play. And that's all I have to say on this one. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Alay. Thank you so much for joining us here. Bonnie, over to you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've said this year, but I really love when we come together and have these conversations, because I think, one, we all get to learn from each other. Sometimes you get to clarify, just like with that, your football example. It was like, oh, that makes sense. Now I have a better way to describe this. So now I have an example, a recorded example of that, of how to describe the difference between your inner knowing and your inner knowing. And there's that difference there. And so thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation for sure.
Thank you so much. And, whether you believe it or not, you're right. It's like, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, we all have knowledge, we all have skills, we all have experience. And it's the experience that really kind of separates each and every single one of us. I don't think that intuition is one of those things that falls into a knowledge, a skill, or an experience. It's one of those things that you just really kind of got to trust it whenever you feel it. It's a feeling, it's an emotion. But where does it come from? There's so many different angles that we could have dove into tonight. And, but I'm not a neuroscientist, and I know, we could try to dive into the whole science of, why do we feel the way that we feel, whenever we feel something's about ready to happen or not feel like something's about ready to happen. And it can be overwhelming, to think about the possibilities. And I know myself, if I dive down all those rabbit holes, I'll completely overwhelm myself. But man, there's those little moments in life where you just got to trust that process. Like, you got to trust your training, trust your conditioning, trust your gut, whatever it is that it is for you, trust that. And if you don't, I always tell everybody, trust but verify. Mm-hmm. Bottom line up front, trust but verify. Do not jump to any premature conclusions or outcomes that haven't even happened yet, because, well, you could have this intuition, this gut feeling, if you will, that, man, something's about to go down. This is going to be bad. This is going to suck. Oh man, this is going to be great. I love it. And then when you're disappointed, we kind of touched on a little bit of that tonight, but here's what I always tell everybody. We present ideas and topics and stuff because we want different people to think about different things differently. And that's the purpose. That's the goal here within our conversations. We kind of scratch the surface a little bit, but what we want you to do is we want you to think about those things and have your own conversations. Come to your own judgments, your own conclusions, take that action, get that result, whether it's big, small, positive, or negative. Trust the process. Figure it out, write it down on paper. I see Alay taking a lot of notes all the time as well, too. I do the same thing. I'll take notes. I'm typing right here. So on my screen, I've got like a notepad open. I had to show Bonnie that. Bonnie finally started taking notes as well, too, because she knows that sometimes I say some things on the fly that a lot of times I don't remember. That actually happened to me the other night. Somebody said, wait a second. What'd you say? Dude, I don't know. I just forgot. It was a spark of genius at the moment, and I can't tell you. Go back and listen to the replay, and then you'll hear what I said. I'm going to do the same thing because maybe you pointed out something. But you have to, and I'm gonna I don't know where this came from, but I'm going to say it came from Evan because that's where I heard it from. Good things happen to you. And you have to have that intuition to understand that good things are going to happen to you no matter what. And when you believe that good things are going to happen to you, just believe, take the action, trust but verify, trust but understand you may have to pivot or shift. But man, great conversation as always. I'm truly blessed, truly thankful for each and every one of you. We'll see you in the next episode. My name is Terry Thompson. I am the host of Unbreakable Stories here, along with my co-host Bonnie and our amazing friend here, Alay. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.